Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to ELCA's Stewardcast 2020. My name is Keith Mundy. I'm Program Director for Stewardship in the ELCA, and we're going to have a good conversation today with several presenters around the topic of how mission support adds vitality to your congregation. Let us begin with the Protoboard of Prayer. The Lord be with you. Gracious Lord, we thank you for this time to gather, that we may hear how your gifts are being used in and through our congregations to do your work. We pray for those who are affected by the virus across this country, that they may feel the healing hand of God, and that we may continue to serve our Lord in the ways that we are called to do so in our local settings. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Some of you may be aware that the ELCA is working towards a specific set of strategic goals for 2025. We're pursuing those goals through two particular lenses. One of those is that of vitality, and the other is leadership. And today we have a combination of that, leaders talking about vitality related to mission support and congregations. We'll be hearing from several presenters who have experience in different aspects of the life of the church and in synods and congregations, and we would like these stories to be ones that you can share with those in your local congregation. But before we begin that process, I invite you to take a moment and think about, when was a time that your life has been impacted by mission support? As I reflect on my life, I think it's specific times, three specific times as a matter of fact. One is when I was in middle school and we moved to a new neighborhood, and there was a mission congregation just getting started. And mission support dollars helped to start that congregation. A few years later, I went to college and I was involved with campus ministry. Campus ministry, another way that mission support dollars are making a difference. And through that campus ministry experience, we had many different events, retreats that we went to, and those retreats were at Lutheran Outdoor Ministry Centers. Another ministry that is impacted by mission support. A few years later, my wife and I, living in Minnesota, helped to start a mission congregation there, and again, mission support dollars. So as we began to think about different times in our life, when ministries of the church have helped to support and to shape how our faith journey has continued on. And so today we are going to be learning more about mission support, the faith journey of some of these leaders and the people that we work with and serve on a daily basis. We'd like to begin this morning with a presentation from Nick Kiger. Nick is the Associate Director for Mission Support in the ELCA and is based out of Columbus, Ohio. Here's Nick.
Hello, my name is Nick Kiger, and I'm the Associate Director for Mission Support. On behalf of myself and our Director for Mission Support, Victoria Flood, we are so excited to have you joining together for this conversation about mission support and congregational vitality. Our team describes mission support as being all about faith and relationships. We know that both faith and relationships are foundations of vital congregations as well. As we are three expressions of one church, our relationships with God and with one another not only hold us together, but they also help us be in ministry together locally, nationally, and globally. While it is natural sometimes to think about mission support as just another line item, we have experienced how focusing our sharing of mission support as part of a vital congregation allows us to strengthen and expand our relationships. We believe that through sharing mission support that we get to participate together in proclaiming the good news in a variety of ways among a multitude of people beyond our own walls. We get to make a difference in places where we physically cannot be. And we get to focus on being a neighbor through ministry that we do beyond ourselves instead of focusing on our own survival. We hope that seeing mission support through the lens of congregational vitality, that we can leave behind the thinking of fear and competition and replace it with thinking about abundance and partnership. Finally, we know that we aren't the experts. The experts are all of you. How do you see mission support adding vitality to your congregation or synod? What is the joy you experience through sharing mission support? How are you able to tell the story of that joy and encourage others to do the same? And how can the mission support team equip you to be successful in sharing the story about mission support? We encourage each of you to reach out to us, and you can email me at nick.kiger@elca.org. Again, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We hope by the end of this time together that you will be re-energized to go out and be church together for the sake of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for your comments, and we appreciate the idea that we are partners in this ministry. Our next presenter is one of those partners. It is Miss Faith Simonig, who is from Western North Dakota. She is the Synod Stewardship staff person and has worked in that particular role for almost 5 years. Her focus is on planned giving and stewardship education with the congregations of Western North Dakota. Faith, welcome.
Thank you, Keith. I've worked in the church for over 20 years in some capacity or another, and my favorite thing to say about stewardship is this: it's not about money, it's about ministry. Yes, we do need money for ministry, but money is just one of the many tools that further God's work in the world that He's given us to do that. Mission support dollars alone do not add life to congregations. Mission support isn't what builds a rostered leader's confidence to talk about money in front of the congregation they serve. You could say that our synod has been able to move from sharing 42% of mission support with Churchwide to sharing 47% because the center of the Bakken oil field is in Western North Dakota. But you would be wrong, because not everyone has an oil well. There are 162 congregations in our synod, but 84% of them worship 100 or fewer per week. It's good to be with you today to share stories of the mission and ministry that's happening in the congregations in our synod. But before I do that, I'd like to describe the environment when former Bishop Nairn took office 11 and a half years ago, because the circumstances and challenges of that time influenced the way we ministered to the people in our care. A new method of oil and gas extraction was providing hundreds of jobs and opportunities for new business. It was also distributing revenue that was unexpected to people and families and congregations and nonprofits. The whole country was in recession, and people flocked to Western North Dakota for jobs with wages that were unheard of before. Fundraisers also flocked to Western North Dakota. They seized the opportunity to assist people with all that cash. Unfortunately, not everyone had won the lottery and had an oil well in their backyard. And as we know, the price of oil can go down in a second. Anyone who is connected to farming and ranching, they may experience too much rain or not enough rain. Stories of lean years in agriculture are passed down from generation to generation, which cause a sense of scarcity. Hang on tightly to any extra you have. You may need it someday. So that's what the landscape looked like when our newly elected bishop encouraged the Synod Council to set a goal of sharing 50% of mission support received with the churchwide organization. The plan of increasing a percentage each year, going from 42% to 50%, was approved without any pushback, and we got to work. Now, the people in the communities of our synod were facing adaptive challenges at that time that were occupying all of their attention. So the synod showing up and asking for an increase in mission support just put us in a queue with all the other people, organizations, and fundraisers who had their hands out. Bishop Mark had set the personal goal of building relationships with people and the congregations he was serving as bishop, and he began by listening. The steady and in some cases increased mission support provided us the means, the financial means, to maintain the resources that a synod provides. Now Mark loves to cook, and so every fall he created a route to visit congregations across the synod, and the synod staff cooked and hosted a chili and chicken noodle soup dinner. We spent time dwelling in the Word and chatting about the work of the synod. After a few years, synod staff got sick of chili, and we renamed the tour Dishin' with the Bish, and we made a tater tot hot dish, which is a local favorite at church potlucks. Especially at the beginning of Mark's term, you would not find him or our executive staff in the office, and that work pattern continues today. We visited congregations and met with people in their communities, often sitting at their kitchen tables. Mission support allowed us the financial means to get out of the office. We hung around before and after events, listening to people who were discerning how and where they might serve the church. This is an important way our staff continues to minister to people today. We listened, and then we did what Jesus taught us and what Jesus did best. We shared the stories. Through our effort of connecting with people in their lives, people expanded their understanding of relationship with the church. And then they were able to see more clearly that it wasn't about the synod trying to get more of their money, but it was about the synod inviting people to participate in putting their faith in action and making a difference for the sake of the gospel. As leaders, we are called to model faithful financial stewardship to our congregations by preaching and teaching about it, by talking about money, and inviting people to financially support their congregation, their synod, the ministries and organizations that they love. And we thank them all the time. We thank them at their kitchen tables, we thank them with personal handwritten notes, and we thank them publicly. Mission support has allowed us to provide scholarships to send leaders to stewardship events. We use stewardship mission support dollars for staff time and resources, teaching and coaching rostered leaders how to share offering stories of how the money is used, rather than coaching them on how to ask for money to pay for their bills. They have a whole lot more fun when they do that. And when leaders are having fun, sharing stories of ministry and faith in action, the congregation members begin to have fun. It's contagious, and people want to be a part of that. The congregations who talk about money when they don't need money are the congregations who have money for ministry. When a rostered leader speaks from the pulpit about their personal financial giving and lives generously as leaders themselves, congregations begin to see a difference in their offering, which allows for more to be accomplished in that congregation and also outside of that building. The more that our rostered leaders and lay leaders share stories of how mission support is used, the more comfortable they become. At the same time, they build a healthy relationship with financial stewardship, and that's reflected in the way that congregations members move into a relationship of trust, trusting that their financial gifts will be used as they were told it would be, and to make a difference in people's lives. And then the layers of generosity and giving just keep building. Pastor Col Bentley is my favorite example of how this works. Cole serves Medagoshi Lutheran Church, and they worship on the campus of an outdoor ministry site on the shore of Lake Medagoshi, just a few miles from the Canadian border. Very soon upon Pastor Cole's arrival in the congregation, the stewardship team decided to visit every member's home to thank people of the congregation and to share stories of how their gifts were making a difference. With some stewardship coaching from our staff, off they went. It didn't take much time at all before Pastor Cole began to see a difference and see positive results. And then his confidence grew. He started doing what we call offering moments on Sundays during announcements. And Pastor Cole shared one Sunday how the congregation pays rent for sharing their worship space with the outdoor ministry site. Either people had forgotten this or didn't know it, but it became the start of some good conversation around the coffee pot at the local gas station. I love the most recent thing he's done. He created a children's sermon on their narrative budget on the day of the congregation's annual meeting. Many leaders that I meet with often think developing a narrative budget is too difficult. And yet here's one done in a children's sermon. I've seen the recording of this, and it is very good work. He had fun doing it. Visitors who were in worship that day stayed for the annual meeting. I've never heard of that happening before. The visible growth in the life of this congregation is a direct result of mission support offerings that create financial resources for education opportunities, mentoring and coaching of stewardship team volunteers. To determine the mission support, how mission support adds life to a congregation or builds confidence and strength in leaders, we can't just measure the amount of money raised or the percentage of growth in attendance. Rather, we must ask ourselves, how does the work we're doing nurture the people and congregations entrusted to our care? Does our work reflect the glory of God? Do we continually lift up the purpose, mission, and vision of the congregation so that the people in the pews can articulate why their congregation exists? And why should they contribute financially to it and the synod? Bethlehem Lutheran Church is in Ross, North Dakota. Another story for you. This community listed a population of 97 people in the 2010 census. At the height of the oil boom, people lived in their cars and campers and trailers just parked all around the church. So the congregation opened their doors and their hearts to this group of people who follow the oil and gas industry. God was and is truly present in this tiny congregation. What they did during this time, and they continue to do today, when most other communities were fearful of the strangers who were living in their cars and campers, is a true definition of vitality. The ministry didn't belong to the congregation. They just planted the seeds and nurtured the people who were in their care. They built a bus stop shelter for the kids that they saw waiting for the school bus on cold mornings. They put a swing set and playground equipment on their church property for the whole community to use. They opened their church kitchen so that families could bake birthday cakes in a real oven rather than in a camper. They opened the church basement to families at Thanksgiving and other holidays so them and their visitors could sit around a full-size table rather than in a camper. Each year they set aside $25,000 to $35,000 for outreach, and that's above and beyond what they share in mission support, what they share to their camp and their nursing home. The generosity of this congregation continues, as does the mission support they share with the synod. The last time I visited this congregation on a Sunday for worship, there's about 45 people there, and that's their typical Sunday worship. Last year, they gave away $100,000, which is 70% of their operating budget. They faithfully spend to zero every year. There's no magic program that can increase or maintain mission support. It takes listening and sharing stories of faith in action. It takes building relationships by meeting people where they're at in their life and helping them to develop a healthy relationship with money. Providing tangible resources that are easy for people to use, along with some coaching and encouragement, isn't difficult work. We just need to give it the time it deserves and then trust that God will do the rest. We haven't yet reached our goal of sharing 50% of mission support, but I know that we will. And even though that dollars will move us to that goal, it's not about the money. There's joy in our giving, and there's great joy in being a part of sharing what we have to support important ministries of our church.
Thank you, Faith. Appreciate that, and especially appreciate the stories that you shared. Our next speaker is going to be Rob James, Pastor Rob James, who's a member of our ELCA Congregational Vitality team. Please listen to the stories that Rob has to tell. Thank you.
Hello, siblings in Christ. My name is Rob James. I am the ELCA Congregational Vitality Program Director for Learning and Evaluation. It does fit on one business card, actually. But before I joined our Congregational Vitality team in 2018, I was the mission developer and pastor of GPS Faith Community, God's People Serving in Machesney Park, Illinois. So I was there from 2006 to 2018. I was asked in my current role, but also in that previous experience, to talk about mission support and how mission support adds vitality to congregations. So if I'm going to talk mission support, I need to talk stewardship. And if I'm going to talk both those together, I have to start with confession. I know as a mission developer, right, especially those years after our grants ended, we were on a shoestring budget, and we often said we didn't even have the whole shoestring. And I've been in those conversations, I've been in that place where I know that the easiest thing to cut is mission support. It's an unfortunate reality, but if you don't pay the electric bill, the electric company turns off your power. And if you don't give mission support, generally nobody comes knocking down the door saying you can't be there doing what you're doing. But I also know from experience that it's a first step towards a greater isolation and feeling like we're on our own. We are indeed church together, and that happens when we celebrate and share the stories of how we're church together. So I think to talk mission support, we have to talk stewardship. And to talk stewardship, I think we have to name some of the mistakes that I know I've made, and maybe you have as well in your context. I think in a day and age when the church is generally in decline, and when more people aren't going to church, whenever someone new does manage to come into our community, we're so welcoming that we don't expect anything. I actually think that's a mistake. In fact, our mission started 3 months before I got there, so this was on them before I joined, but I let it go on for a couple years. Is a new start every Sunday. We counted on new people being there, and our line when it was time for offering and worship was we would say, if you're a guest with us today, let those baskets pass on by and let this service be our gift to you. At our 10-year anniversary, I stood up and said, some of you are still acting like your first-time guests after 10 years. Because we hadn't done a good enough job about not only teaching stewardship and the value that it gives to our lives as discipleship, but about connecting that to the greater story of who we are as one congregation in this excellent and wonderful denomination. So our 10-year anniversary, actually, and we did before, but our 10-year anniversary is when we worked hard to make sure that that connection was strong. We're fortunate, we're about an hour away from our church-wide office here in Chicago. And so I was able to bring some of our great My Now colleagues out to preach and to share stories and to connect us to that story. But I think we can do an even better job often of just using the resources that are out there, the stories of faith in action that comes out, Facebook posts that are shared from our synods and from churchwide, do a great job of helping us connect the people in the pews on Sunday to who we are when we celebrate that we're a church with over 9,000 locations and with millions of people coming together to live as followers of Jesus Christ. I think people want to belong. I think people want to be known. I think people want to be valued when they walk into a congregation. So I don't think we need to give them the easy pass. Instead, I think we need to let them know that they are a part of something bigger and greater than themselves, and that we're excited for them to bring their full selves and their full gifts to who we are together as church. So sharing those stories, you know this, right? I hope you know this, that when offering comes in, your congregation is called upon to send mission support. A percentage of your funds that go to your synod. Your synod uses that to do amazing work throughout your synod, wherever that may be. And then your synod sends a percent of those funds onto our church-wide offices, where we use that to do ministry around the nation and really around the world. And so now in my current role as the Program Director for Learning and Evaluation with Congregational Vitality, I get to talk not just about my story as a mission developer in one congregation, but I get to tell you that in 2019, we approved 39 new starts in the ELCA. Yes, synods and mission partners come alongside to add thousands, if not even hundreds of thousands and millions more. But the grants that we're able to give because of your offering allow us to say yes to these new starts that come in so that we can start new ministries among ethnic-specific communities, so that we can start new ministries that might look different than what a lot of us expect to see as a church. Maybe it's not a Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, and maybe it's not in a building, but there's a community gathered together around word and sacrament, about building relationship, about learning to live as followers of Jesus. All of these ministries happen because we celebrate that we are church together and we use the resources that God has given us to do this ministry. I could talk about a number of different things. It's not just new starts. We have strategic ministries. Strategic ministries are ministries among our ethnic-specific communities and communities among people experiencing poverty. We give out hundreds of thousands of dollars to support these ministries because we know that it's who we need to be as church together. So let me back up in case you've never heard us say this. We don't have a definition of congregational vitality. The reason is actually pretty simple, and that is that if we tried to define vitality, we'd start a fight. Because the first thing that we think of is numbers. When we try and talk about vitality, people want to know, well, how many people are showing up at worship, and what's your budget, and what'd you do for this or that or the other thing? And as soon as we start talking numbers, we start comparing ourselves, and as soon as we start comparing ourselves, we're not being church together. So we have a contextual description of congregational vitality, and that we are communities of Jesus, nurturing life-changing relationships with God, one another, and the world. Doesn't that sound like who you are, who you're called to be as one congregation, a part of this larger church together? We celebrate that this vitality happens when we come together in relationship. And so 2 times a year, we have our Congregational Vitality training. Just a couple weeks ago, we were in San Diego with almost 400 leaders from across the country. This is where we train our new mission developers, those who are learning what's needed and what's been asked of them to go and start a brand new ministry wherever they've been planted. But it's also where we gather teams together to train and to support synod teams that can go out and help congregations come together and create collaborations and cohorts so that we know and can celebrate that we're not doing this alone. We can stop competing with one another. We can start encouraging one another. It's where we train our vital congregations leaders who are doing ministries in places where something needs to change, but we know the Holy Spirit is at work and there's hope and there's potential. And so these leaders are taking on calls that are more challenging than anything I could imagine. Remember, I'm a start new, not a try and turn around kind of person. This ministry of congregational vitality, of celebrating that we're called into this collaboration, couldn't happen if we didn't celebrate that we really are church together, not only when we come together, but when we send our checks in, when we celebrate that the offering we've received and the gifts that we have are not just ours, but are for all of us. And when I say all of us, I don't just mean those of us who are in the congregation, I mean those people in our communities. The mission support dollars that turns into grants and turns into other ministries that get sent around this world are leading in places where ministries are happening for people outside the church buildings that wouldn't happen otherwise. So we've created a homeless and justice ministry network. It's one of our strong cohorts now at our training that we just did. This group of leaders from across the country doing ministry in places that's hard are sharing awesome stories of how they're out serving food and sharing clothes and being in relationship with people that desperately need to know that they are loved by a great God. Our dollars come together to support that ministry in places that you and I probably won't ever go to, perhaps. But we get to celebrate that when the pastors that are doing that in that work and the lay leaders that they've lifted up and brought alongside of them are doing that, that we are there as the church together.
Well, thank you, Rob, for your comments about congregational vitality and the ministries that are made possible through our mission support. Our next speaker is going to be DEM Danielle Denise from the North Carolina Synod. She's been a DEM there for about 2.5 years and is going to share some of the exciting things they're doing to grow mission support in their congregation.
I'm Pastor Danielle Denise. I serve as the Director for Evangelical Mission here in the North Carolina Synod. We are a synod that stretches all the way from the mountains just past Asheville to the coast with one of our congregations on the Outer Banks. So it's about 8.5 hours between our congregations across the synod. And we cover all kinds of landscape, inner city, Charlotte, rural North Carolina, coastal, mountain. So you can imagine just from that our synod is really broad, which means the work of our synod around mission support and stewardship is also broad as we engage with lots of different kinds of congregations. We have 197 congregations here in the North Carolina Synod, 6 mission starts, and we're really, really thankful for the ways that we get to be in partnership together. Prior to this role, I served as a parish pastor of 2 congregations in our synod and have been on our staff here as part of the bishop's staff in North Carolina just over 2.5 years. So we've done a lot of work and I'm excited to share some of that with you. One of the things that's true is that we are a diverse synod in regards to geography and in regards to even languages spoken in our congregations. We have one congregation on the Qualla boundary and with the Cherokee, Eastern Band Cherokee people, and they worship in Cherokee and English. We've got several congregations that are bilingual or worship in Spanish along the way. So there's lots of diversity in particular expressions across our church, but we like most of the LCA and racial diversity are largely white. We have a pretty large economic diversity in regards to we've got congregations in areas of rural North Carolina where there will be no more population growth. there will be no more new industry moving into those places. And those congregations think about vitality different than our congregations in large cities like Raleigh and Charlotte. The city of Raleigh and Wake County, where they're located, is adding 64 new people a day. That's remarkable. And then there are places and counties that are not experiencing that kind of life just by kind of normal. People are moving to the Triangle and places like that, and in our synod and across our state. Let me start with, when I came on to the Synod staff, one of the things that Bishop Smith brought me onto staff to do was to lead a visioning campaign across our Synod. Our Synod had not done a mission, purpose, vision since 1999, and so it had been a lot of years with our current kind of mission and focus. And so in 2018, our North Carolina Synod Assembly adopted a purpose statement for the North Carolina Synod, that we will cultivate and celebrate vital congregations, that we will identify, equip, and nurture whole and healthy leaders, that we will embrace and engage in collaboration, and we will proclaim the promise of the resurrection with a prophetic voice, all for the sake of the world. And so part of what that's done for us in mission support in particular has allowed us to storytell at a different level, because we are we're talking about our own purpose around every corner. And so it's allowed us to say, your mission support helps us celebrate vital congregations. Your mission support helps us cultivate vital congregations. And so one of the key things that we did in 2018 was to say, here's our purpose. The second thing that we did in our visioning process was to name our core values. And we led core value exercises across the Synod, engaged about 700 members of congregations around the Synod in a core value exercise, and named 4 core values that we were going to commit to, that were going to be our lens for our work together. The first core value is Jesus Christ. Maybe not surprising. We're not a club. It's funny, when we did that originally, we were sort of making assumptions. Yes, of course, Jesus. And we heard across the Synod, let's not make assumptions. Let's not have people pretend we're a club. Let us clearly say that we have been marked, claimed, and sent by Jesus Christ into the world. Our second core value is generosity. It showed up all over the place, which I love. This is a generous synod. This is a synod that gives mission support to the church-wide expression. They're a synod that has a foundation that gives away $500,000 a year to congregations and local agencies and institutions doing mission work in our synod. And so it was really lovely to hear people from across the Synod say generosity is our lens of doing life together. The other 2 were relationship and reconciliation. The reason I share that is because that lens of generosity being named changed things for us. Because if we really believe generosity is a core value, then we can't start every letter that we communicate to the Synod from a mindset of scarcity. We don't have enough. There isn't enough. Our conversation has to be anchored in abundance and belief that God will do a new thing, even if we have resources that are dwindling economically or financially. So those are things that were really key to us in regards to mission support. And I share all of that to say that part of what is uniting congregations that are so different is our purpose and our values. And it is uniting congregations in common language, so that when people say, why do we give to the Synod? They can answer, vital congregations, whole and healthy leaders, collaboration and prophetic voice. right? That's what we're going to do and be about. So that's really shifted things for us. And in the process, maybe to answer your question a little more directly, in the process of us doing some visioning work and naming what a vital congregation was, we were very clear to say that a vital congregation is more than money and attendance numbers or butts and bucks. How do we move beyond those as metrics? And we were also really clear to change the way we asked for mission support. We don't have a complicated formula. Our request is 10%. That's the request we make of congregations. But what was happening is that we were asking congregations to give to mission support. Sometimes it was congregations that had given $0 or $1,000 of mission support, and we were sending them a letter that said, do your 10%. That's $12,000. And I had pastors say to me when I started this job, oh, I got a letter that said 12,000 and my congregation's currently giving 700. I throw that in the trash. Like there's no way we can get there. So we really started, one, to storytell, but two, to scale our ask to what people had given. So if people were giving less than $250, of which we have congregations, our ask was, would you increase $25 a month? This year in 2020, we had I think we had 9 congregations that were giving $0 to the synod, and 5 of them became pledgers and givers in 2020 because we asked them for $25 a month, $50 a month, which doesn't seem like a lot. You're like, man, I only got $400 or $500 from that congregation. But what we're saying is, like, we're in it together now. Right? And there's such beauty in saying, all right, your $400 is becoming this in the life of our synod. It is helping us with, like $400 in our synod could mean supporting a mission congregation. It could mean doing social justice and advocacy work. And so for us, part of the vitality indicator is to say, you're not only vital if you're giving 10%, you're vital because God put you there, right? But also part of your vitality is learning to grow in generosity. And we don't usually go from a 0 to a 10. We go from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3. And so part of it has been inviting congregations to figure out how to go from a 1 to a 2 and a 2 to a 3. For us, one of the things that we make great use of is the Congregational Vitality Survey, which is available through the ELCA. And we use that all over our synod. We have had up to this point, I think about 60 congregations take the Vitality Survey. And our goal at the end of 2021 is that we'll have over 100 congregations that have taken the Vitality Survey. And what we love about the Vitality Survey is it talks about vitality in 3 areas: your relationship with God, each other, and the world. And we always joke that if you're all about Jesus and don't care about each other or the world, you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good, right? And so there's got to be this sort of balance between God and then also the outward expression of that. But we also aren't just a club. And so we can't just measure relationship with each other. And we're not just a social service agency. So it can't just be the world. And what we love about the Vitality Survey is that it does all 3 of those things. And it allows congregations to think deeply about what is my sense of God's presence in this worship expression? How often am I praying? What does my daily faith life look like? And that those are caught up as indicators of health in a congregation. Can we manage conflict? How well do we communicate with each other? These are questions they ask in the relationship with each other portion. And then the outward to the world is, do we advocate? Are we just doing social charity, or are we engaged with our neighbor? Those kind of questions. So when I'm working with congregations in smaller, I would say smaller size congregations where budgets and sustainability are always sort of a pressure, one of the first things they do is the Vitality Survey to say, okay, but God has still been present. So what does this look like? Where can we celebrate that there is vitality? And then where do we also start naming some of the struggles and challenges that lay ahead? In the North Carolina Synod, one of the things that we're encouraging those congregations to do is to consider partnership. And to share. We have not, unlike other synods, I know there's lots of other synods that have multi-point parishes and shared ministry expressions. That is new to North Carolina in our modern expression of the synod. And so we actually brought on, because of mission support, and I think this is another reason people are feeling like mission support matters, is we brought on a full-time staff member that is now just doing shared ministry arrangements. She's just working with congregations to shepherd them into partnering, because it's not like eHarmony. It's not like, well, you are 5 miles from here and you didn't break off from each other, so you can basically be paired together. It's a lot of relational trust building. And so I think in particular, some of our congregations that have not seen the synod as valuable to them are noticing the synod taking a risk by bringing on a full-time staff member, but it's something that has direct impact on our smaller congregations that are struggling with sustainability. And when we talk about that in regards to the synod vision, we actually include it under prophetic voice, because we think it's prophetic to say we don't have to do everything the same way, and God might make us new. And so I think that's also been helpful, because people feel like they're doing something gospel-centered by looking at partnership. And I think that's been really, really life-giving for people. So a couple things that we've instituted, and we still have a long way to go to figure out, we're doing really pretty solidly right now in mission support. And yet we recognize that we're going to have to look at some sustainability things even for us as a synod. But one of the things that we did was we have a synod e-news that goes out, a synod newsletter. And the first Tuesday of the month is always a bishop's reflection. And the third Tuesday of the month always features what we call a mission support story. And it directly ties to something around vital congregations, whole and healthy leaders, collaboration, or prophetic voice. And those stories are just that. They're stories. We joke often that we're really good at inspirational facts as Lutherans, and that people ask us for what's exciting. We just give them the more facts. And so we are really trying to be storytellers. And those mission support stories highlight things that you don't always expect. For example, it might be a candidacy story, but you get to hear about an internship site visit made possible by mission support, or the experience of a call committee chair in calling their new pastor, made possible by mission support, right? And it's turned out that our most read article, maybe not surprisingly, is the reflection from the bishop, but pretty much across the board, the next most read article every month is our mission support story, as we look at our analytics. The other two things that we have done that I think have been helpful, one is that this past January, we hosted a council president webinar, just like this via Zoom, and we did 3 different times so that people could hop in and on as they needed, and had I think we had 75 council presidents on a webinar with us. And it was an opportunity for us to share, here's what the synod is, but also provide resources, and then talk about constitutions and parochial reports and all these other kind of legitimate things that they need to attend to. But we actually created some video devotions around our core values, and we made those available for congregation councils to use at their meetings around devotionals. So the more that we can have resources for congregations that directly tie into our story as a synod makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing that I think has been a shift for us, and this has been at the insistence of our bishop, is the very clear language that the office is not the synod, that the synod is all of us together. And so even when I go to a congregation, I don't say things like, I bring you greetings from the synod. I say, I bring you greetings from Bishop Smith, because we are the synod. And that's just a language thing that I think is really important to us. I mean, we always say you can't have one without the other, right? Like, we don't get vital congregations unless we have whole and healthy leaders. And generally, we don't have whole and healthy leaders when they have to serve dysfunctional congregations, right? Like, that's the reality. So that's really important to us. But it also has mattered a lot in the sense of, like, we've tried to be really grateful for candidacy. The person in charge of candidacy in our synod just goes to worship with the congregations that have candidates and stands up on Sunday, doesn't preach, but just says thank you, because you are showing the synod vitality. You are showing each other what it looks like to be vital by raising up leaders for our church. And quite frankly, for us in North Carolina, and I know our seminary that's close to us, our leaders are coming from camps and campus ministries, and we have a ton of those in North Carolina. And so that's part of what we do too, is to celebrate those partnerships and those ministries. But leadership is definitely key. The other thing I was going to say is, I think the other thing that is inspiring some vitality across the synod is that leaders are doing things like, I think this year alone, it's March, I've probably done 4 core value exercises in congregations, because they see the synod naming this and they're starting to say, wait a second, we've got to know who we are. We've got to name our own core values. Man, we need to be able to tell our story like the synod office is telling the story across the state. And so that, I think, has been we have tried very intentionally to model what we hope could be embodied in congregations. And so that's been fun for me, just to be a part of congregations being really clear about who they want to be, what their core values are, and how they want to operate in the world. And what we said across the synod was, you individual congregation don't have to say the synod's core values are yours, because you might have a separate expression of our synod in Cherokee or West Charlotte or in the Triangle or on the coast, but your congregation should resonate with the synod core values, which are ours shared across the state together. So that's been fun.
Well, Danielle, thank you very much for your thoughts about mission support and ministry in the North Carolina Synod. At this point, we'd like to take a few minutes and go back with Nick Kiger. He has a few stories to share with us about how mission support has had an impact on lives of congregations. Nick?
Mission support really allows us to reach out beyond our walls and into our communities, and it helps us make ministry possible in places where we can't be. In Montana, there's a pastor named Ned, and Ned explains his work as part-time. And I use those quotes because I know that no pastor's work is ever part-time, just their pay. Ned's church building looks nothing like most of our congregations. And in fact, you had to get a background check, empty your pockets, and walk through a metal detector to go into his congregation, escorted by a guard. Ned's congregation is the Montana State Prison. Ned's congregation, of course, includes guys who come to services and Bible studies, but it also includes the guys who never come to worship, but greet him with a smile and a hug when they see him walking on the cell block, and a death row inmate for whom he prays daily. Mission support makes Ned's ministry possible, and it extends our ministry, every one of us who are part of the ELCA, into the prison and many ministries like it. In South Carolina, a pastor named Jorge saw a need for leadership in his congregation and a new Latino congregation in Columbia called Cristo Rey. On a Sunday in February a few years ago, I sat in Jorge's congregation as people came into the sanctuary and gathered as a community. Children played and ran in circles and around the sanctuary during Jorge's sermon, but all the eyes and ears were on him as he preached God's word to his community. As someone who doesn't speak Spanish, I couldn't understand much of what he was saying, but in his eyes and in the authority of his words, I knew he was preaching grace and acceptance to a community that has a hard time feeling that way lately. After the service, Jorge greeted me and explained that the congregation was one of the only places where his people felt safe and loved. Through mission support, you help make Jorge's ministry possible. And I know currently that they're in the process of actually building their own building as part of that congregation. I also recently worshiped at a recently closed congregation in Kansas City that through their closing was able to breathe life into a new worshiping community called the Gathering Table. The Gathering Table is a community of mostly homeless, unemployed, and underemployed people. The mission developer in that congregation, Pastor Ann, works tirelessly on behalf of the people in her congregation to make sure that they have their basic needs met, as well as their spiritual needs, including weekly communion. Members of that congregation know that they will never be able to sustain themselves and sometimes feel the pressure of keeping their ministry going. As we were eating lunch together after the service, one of the members of the congregation asked me with a worried look, "How much longer will this congregation be here?" I have to admit I wasn't prepared for that question. Luckily, Pastor Ann was right beside me and answered, "Hopefully, we will be here as long as God is calling us to be here, and as long as our siblings in Christ are willing to support us." I wish I could have captured the moment of relief on that member's face as she said thank you in a way that no words could ever do. You help make Ann's ministry possible through the mission support that you share in the ministry of the Gathering Table. These are just a few ways in which your mission support makes a difference. And not only do you add vitality to your own congregation, but you add vitality to congregations that might not look like yours in places where you aren't, all around the country and all around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for those additional stories. Our next presenter is going to be Dana Dutcher from our Global Mission Unit. As many of you know, Global Mission is a very important and visible ministry of our church. Dana is going to share how mission support is an important way that this ministry is made possible. Dana?
Good morning. My name is Dana Dutcher, and I have the privilege to serve at the church-wide office in the Global Mission Unit. I'm the manager for impact data reporting, and what that means is I get to look at all the work that we do within Global Mission and figure out what is the impact that we're making. How is our work touching the lives of those around the world and within our communities? I have the privilege of working with grants that we give with our mission support dollars, and I'm here to tell you about the difference that your contribution is making here within the Global Mission Unit. For those of you that know, the ELCA is a part of the Lutheran World Federation. And what this is, it's a group of Lutheran churches around the world in over 98 countries, representing 148 different church bodies and approximately 75.5 million Lutherans globally. That's a community that we're a part of, that's something bigger than ourselves, that we get to work with people around the world. In Global Mission, the ELCA entrusts us to work with those relationships, to be the voice of the church with others, to represent you as ELCA members at the global scale. Mission support dollars is crucial to the work that we do in Global Mission, and we wouldn't be able to do it without the dollars that come from congregations to synods that is then shared with churchwide. Global Mission annually stewards about $14 million in global support funds, in mission support funds. That allows us to send missionaries around the world, that allows the Young Adults in Global Mission program to work, that gives us the Companion Synod program and Mission Formation. And I'll talk a little bit more about each one of those programs. And I personally also benefited from mission support dollars. Before I came to work at Churchwide, I was a missionary in Japan for 3 years. And that mission service was possible because of mission support dollars. See, when those funds go into the plate on Sunday morning, they then go up to the Synod level, and the Synod then shares a portion of that with Churchwide. which Global Mission gets a piece of that to do our ministry as the ELCA around the world with other Lutherans within the Lutheran World Federation. So the missionaries and the mission personnel that we send around the world are possible because of the mission support dollars that have been entrusted to our care. So as a missionary sent to Japan, it was the church-wide office that I was representing to be the ELCA's hands and feet in Japan to walk alongside our companions there. Our missionaries now are serving in countries throughout the world doing various tasks, whether they're homiletic professors at seminaries, whether they're pastoring international congregations in Kenya, or whether they're teaching English in Japan. Their position and their ministry, their witness to the world is possible through the mission support dollars that we have. Another amazing program that's made possible through mission support dollars is the Young Adults in Global Mission program, also called YAGM. The YAGM program is present in over 10 countries around the world and sends about 100 volunteers every year to do a year of intentional ministry, of accompanying our partners and walking alongside one another to learn together, to witness together, and to learn about what it means to be a Christian in a pluralistic society. What does it mean to be globally formed and globally informed? That when these young adults finish their year of service around the world, they come back to the ELCA and are able to share that witness with our churches here. They're able to have an impact on the congregation members who have maybe never left their town, who are not able to travel around the world, and they're able to share the story of what it is that God is up to in other places. Because we don't bring God when we go, God is already there. And we have the privilege of being able to be present with those churches and to hear their stories and to see what God is doing and to bring that back to the ELCA. Another team that is funded by Mission Support is the Mission Formation team in Global Mission. You might have heard them as Glocals. What does it mean to think globally and act locally? What does it mean to have all this knowledge from our partners around the world, and how can we use that here in the ELCA? The Mission Formation team helps us to contextualize what does that look like for us in the United States? What does that look like for us North Americans? And how can we learn to be better brothers and sisters in the church, both locally and around the globe? Maybe you've had them at a Synod assembly where they've come to share music from our companion churches, where they've shared songs and joyful stories from the global church. The Mission Formation team is a vital part of bringing the gifts from our companions back to the ELCA to contextualize the work here that we do. Another program that's funded through mission support dollars that Global Mission is very proud of is the Companion Synod program. This program has been running since the duration of the ELCA for 30 years, where 64 of our synods are partnered with global companions around the world. Some synods have one partner and some have up to 5 partnerships, where we share the knowledge back and forth and where our congregations are enriched because of the global learnings that we have. We know evangelism can sometimes be tough. So what is it that we can learn from our companions around the world, from Tanzania, and bring back to our synod in Wisconsin? What is it that we can learn from our partners in the outreach they do in Indonesia and bring that back to Kentucky? How can we learn together and witness together in ministry? The Companion Synod program is a very strong way that congregations are vitalized through the work that we do globally, by exchanging of pastors and theologians, by having guests come and visit. We can learn more about ways to make our congregations more fruitful. In addition to programs that were run here at the churchwide organization, annually Global Mission also stewards just over $2 million in global grants. In fiscal year 2020, we're slated to support over 160 grants to our companion churches around the world. Your mission support dollars not only help evangelism and churches thrive here in the United States, but they also help churches thrive globally. We regularly award grants in areas of mission outreach and evangelism, in education, theological discernment, to help churches around the world grow in their ministry and their mission. These grants are vital to the support of the Lutheran World Federation, as well as that we're sharing the gifts that we have with our brothers and sisters around the world. Another program that is really sharing the wealth of education is the International Leaders Program. This is a program that's been one of the ELCA's best kept secrets, where our companion churches around the world send people here to the United States or to churches in other parts of the world to pursue theological education, to become more informed, to be better leaders for their church. The International Women Leaders Program is also a portion of this program, where young women from around the world come to the United States to receive bachelor's in education through our partnerships with ELCA colleges and universities. These students come to the United States and learn in our institutions and are participants in ELCA congregations. And by having their presence in their classrooms, they're also enriching their classmates' experience and helping people learn about the countries where they come from. By having global companions here in our context, we are continuously growing and being enriched by the stories and the wealth that they bring here to us. It is through your mission support dollars that all these programs are possible, and that global mission can continue to be the ELCA's voice around the world. And for that, we thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for the information about global mission and the ways that we are making a difference around the world. I'd like to take a few minutes here in the closing to summarize and hit some high points, perhaps, from our speakers, as well as to then share a couple resources with you. As I think back about the presentations made this morning, I remember Nick talking about mission support, that portion of our regular offering that is passed on to the Synod for both Synod and church-wide ministries. That is what mission support is about. I think of Faith when she talked about where their Synod began. They began by listening to where people's hearts are, listening to how people wanted to make a difference in the lives of others, and then sharing stories about how they are doing that already in so many ways through the work of the Synod and church-wide ministries. I noted she said it was important to have a goal. Their Synod had a goal, and it's important for congregations to have a goal. If we have that goal, if we know the direction we want to go, it helps us to be moving in the right direction. Then I remember her share the story of the small congregation. A small town, a population of 97 people, 45 people in worship on a Sunday morning, and they give away 70% of their income. It begins to show us that if they trust in God and that God will provide, there's hope that they can move ahead and help others. I think then about Rob's conversation. And Rob talked about the value of using an anniversary in the life of the congregation as a way to lift up some of those fundamental goals that the congregation has in the long term. Anniversaries are reminding points, or reminder points in the timeline of our congregation of things that we're trying to accomplish long term and how we've made progress over that time. He shared with us about how we work with new starts, 39 new starts last year. I recently saw the list, and we have over 350 mission developers for new starts around this country. Over 300 mission developers. These are the places where we are making a difference. This includes some work that we're doing with the homeless and justice ministries. These are ministries that are called strategic ministries because they are places where we think we need to be on the street with people who need to know that God is there with them. God is there in God's presence, but also through us. And then we can take a look at what Danielle talked about. And she talked about being anchored in the concept of an abundance theology. Look how God has blessed us, and look at what we have to work with, not looking at what we don't have. She talked about the importance of leadership, collaboration, and a prophetic voice. How do we have that prophetic voice in the communities that we serve? We do it through the strength that we have by working together in ministry collaboratively, by growing and developing leaders who are equipped to bring that voice and the actions that go with it to make an impact in our communities. She talked about one of their goals to work with congregations that have zero mission support. And I liked her strategy there of reminding them that you are vital because God put you here to do God's work. Let's talk about what shape that takes and how we can partner to do that together. And then Dana. Dana talked about missionaries. She talked about young adults and global mission, how we're bringing the next generation of leaders and missionaries up in this church. She talked about companion synods that we have around the world and what we're learning by what other synods are doing in different contexts, whether that's evangelism or whether that's service or whether it's how they do an offering. We're listening and we're learning and saying, what can we bring back to our own context? And then she talked about the areas of ministry we fund, international funds for leaders and for women. Again, how are we growing future leaders, both in our church here domestically, as well as leaders around the world? We do that partially through our participation with the Lutheran World Federation. 75 million Lutherans from around the world working together, trying to figure out how can we be partners together in doing God's work. These are some of the important aspects that are made possible through our mission support. I want to take a few moments and share with you some of the more specific resources that we have. One of those, and you are probably familiar with, is Stories of Faith in Action. This is the annual magazine that comes out each year. It usually comes out just after Labor Day. And it's a magazine that has stories about how our mission support dollars are being used. This is something that is available. You can get it online at the ELCA website, or you can go and order that from our distribution center. The magazine does not cost anything. It is only the shipping of this. So whatever the shipping cost is. And if you go to the ELCA website and look at elca.org/SOFIA, you'll begin to find the stories, the bulletin inserts, pictures, and other information that help support this and can be used in your congregation. A second tool that we have is, where does your offering go? Some of you might be familiar with this in the poster format that looks like this. Some of you might be familiar with this in the 8.5 by 11 two-sided page. Both of those are available at no cost. I will tell you though that this one is out of stock. This is downloadable as is the 8.5 by 11 version off the ELCA website. And we're in the process of producing a new version, an updated version of this. The new version we have is going to be having a discussion guide on the back, printed on the back. So you can use this as a way to start conversation in a forum or with a confirmation class or with youth about where does our offering go? Because that is probably the second most frequently asked question as we travel around the congregations. Where does our offering go? The other piece that is going to be added to this with the next version is that for each of these areas of ministry, the 10 areas here, there is going to be a story that lifts up that particular ministry and how that is being lived out in and through the mission support dollars that are passed on from congregations. Another element that we take a look at, and some of you are familiar with, annual report covers. You might be aware that these are available each year at no cost. And these are something that on the one hand, there's a letter each year from Bishop Eaton on the inside front cover from the presiding bishop that talks a little bit about their thoughts about where we are and where we're going. And then on the back page is a devotional or a guide that gives some conversation about how we do work together at church and how we can grow together as church. Most recently, this version was available electronically online, and it's available in several formats. And that's probably the direction we're going to go. We're finding that the cost of shipping and producing these continues to rise more quickly than we think is economical for congregations. So this has become available electronically. In addition to these resources, some of you may also be familiar with our Mission Interpreter Network. This is a network of volunteers whose specific role is to tell stories about how we make a difference of our giving of time, talents, and resources to do God's work in and through our congregations, synod, and church-wide ministry. This network of hundreds of people around the country telling a story are telling those stories about how mission support is making a difference. More than 40 synods are involved in our mission interpretation ministry, and we certainly welcome conversation with those of you who might be interested in becoming mission interpreters in your congregation. That means you're listening for and looking for where the stories are in your congregation. You're the person to whom we will pass along the stories about synod and church-wide ministries and how they are making a difference. And you work collaboratively with your pastor to decide how do those stories fit into the life and schedule of your congregation. These are resources that will help us grow in mission support. We welcome your questions that you may have about mission support and how does it grow, recognizing that within your synod, your bishop is a primary advocate for mission support, your director of evangelical mission, and your stewardship staff person. If you're a synod that has one, those are three key people who are working in your synod to grow mission support. On your local level, in your congregation, this concept of mission support and mission interpretation is part of the position description. It's part of the role of the pastor in your congregation. But we know the pastor has many roles and responsibilities, and therefore we're looking for leaders in the congregation to accompany, to walk with, to help pastors, to help our church tell the story of how you and I are making a difference in your community and beyond today. Thank you for your time with us. This concludes our Stewardcast 2020. These will be posted on the ELCA website within the next few days, both in its entirety and by each of the different segments for each presenter. Thank you for being here this morning, and if you have questions about mission support, please do not hesitate to contact Nick Kiger, as he said, nick.kiger@elca.org, or myself, keith.mundy@elca.org. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Have a good weekend.